Oh, we are back. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Top Rope Takes. I'm Jason Marcus alongside Willie Thrill. And Will, we are continuing our theme of the wrap up recap of 2024 in pro wrestling. We've done the greatest shows, we've done the best women's wrestlers, we've done the best matches of 2024. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. It's out now. And now it is time for the video that a lot of you have been waiting for. I know it's the one that Will and I have been very excited about. We are talking the top 10 greatest male wrestlers of the year 2024. Before we get into that, though, I got to check in with my buddy Will here. Will, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, this is the one that I'm very much looking forward to. I think we've been pretty agreeable on these past few lists, but I think this one there might be the most disparity between our lists. So we'll have to see. Maybe we're agreeing again, but I just have a feeling that we might have a bit of a different take on what we think were the best wrestlers, men's wrestlers of 2024.
There's a lot of different factors. There's a lot of things you could judge them on, and we're gonna find it all out. But what a hell of a year for pro wrestling! I think just going through all these different podcasts we've been doing and doing the research into the matches and the shows, like we are really living in a great time to be a pro wrestling fan. There's more content than ever. The quality's better than ever. The stories are up there with some of the best ever told, and it's really been a hell of a year.
100%. And I do think that's why there can be disparity, not just between our list, but between anyone's top 10 lists of the favorite wrestlers, because so many wrestlers had such a great year that as long as you might connect differently with a different wrestler, but everyone really took a step up, whether it was inside the ring, whether it was with storytelling. I feel like everyone who is in that conversation
Mm-hmm.
had a standout year and had an argument to possibly be in the top five or even the number one
Mm-hmm.
wrestler. So
Yeah. And before we jump right into our top 10, I do want to acknowledge a couple of things. Obviously, it is very hard. There's a lot of pro wrestling in the world. It's not just WWE and AEW. So there are a lot of people that, aren't going to be on this list, unfortunately, that just, quite frankly, aren't going to get the recognition they deserve. Um, because they're on smaller promotions, and that's unfortunate. But there are people who are doing the great things in TNA and New Japan. Like New Zack Sabre Jr. is not on this list. Spoiler alert, but he held it down in New Japan this year. Like he's putting in great work over there. CMLL, Ring of Honor. So shout out to all pro wrestling, but of course we have to get into the top 10 here. Some big names that you were not going to see on this list. Some honorable mentions off the top. Main event Jey Uso, not making it onto the list in the top 10.
oh, okay. Wow.
I listen. I told you it's a tough list here. No main event Jey Uso. The Rock. Sorry, buddy. It takes more than one night to get on this list. Uh, Konosuke Takeshita been a standout for AEW on pretty much all their shows. He's the current TNT champion, I believe. Um,
International champion.
International. There's too many. It's
I
one of
didn't
those
even
things
have
where,
him on my list, buddy. Come on.
and that's why he's not
I
on
knew
there.
that.
Yeah, there's too many mid card titles. But either way, he's been doing great things for AEW. Hangman Page, not here. Uh, and this is the big one that I want to talk about. Um, I put him on my list, but he's not making our top 10. No Trick Williams,
Ooh,
Mr. NXT. Really held down the fort over there. If you watched our top 10 women's video, go check it out where we talk about Roxanne Perez. Spoiler, I won't tell you where she is, but she's on there. And I think everything we said about Roxanne Perez could be copy pasted Trick Williams. Really held down an entire brand for an entire calendar year. So disappointed to see no Trick Williams on this list. But with that being said, all these guys couldn't make it because our top 10 is stacked, Will. There is no room for any games. It's a great top 10, and I'm excited to get into it. But any thoughts before we officially kick off?
yeah, I want to comment on some of those names. The Rock specifically had maybe the best 3 months of anyone that could be on this list. If he had a full-time year, I would have
Mm-hmm.
no doubt in my mind that he'd be in the top five just because he had an incredible 3 months as
Mm-hmm.
heel Rock. I think it was the fact that he made that switch over to the final boss. It was
Mm-hmm.
so necessary, and he just fit the role like a glove. So definitely deserves some acknowledgement in this top 10 talk, but ultimately you got to be around for the whole year
Yeah.
if you want to make this top 10 list, given the amount of star power and great talent that we've seen throughout the year. Trick Williams, yeah, it is tough to not see him on a top 10 list, but I have no doubt in my mind that he'll end up on a top 10 list in the future. He has so much room to grow, and he did have a phenomenal year in NXT. So shout out to him. One name that you didn't mention that I definitely need to give a shout out to is Joe Hendry. Because he did,
Yes.
because he was, I did have him at 15 on my list because I do think you have to acknowledge just the meteoric rise of how
Yes.
popular he was and his theme song was. Just as far, he just had a presence throughout wrestling throughout the year. Everyone loved the theme song. Everyone wanted to see him wherever. Who knows? He might even show up in the 2025 Royal Rumble.
Never
We'll
know.
have to see. But I
Say
just
his
want to give
name
a
and he
shout out
appears.
to Joe Hendry for just being probably the most meme worthy
Yes.
2024 of any wrestler. So yeah, definitely give him some props.
Yeah, absolutely credit to Joe Hendry. He was able to capture an audience immediately and run with it, and he's going to have a big 2025. I'm very sure of it. Again, surprised to see Jey Uso not make it, but listen, that's what happens when when wrestling's this good. You got to cut him off somewhere. Jey Uso was number 11 for what it's worth. So either way, that's a lot about the people who didn't make the list. Let's talk about the people who made the list. Will, let's kick it off with number 10, and we're already hitting some controversy because at number 10 we actually have a two-way tie. So this
All
will
right.
be
So I said,
a top 11.
wait, oh, wait. So okay, so there's two, so there's 11 people, but these two tied for 10.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Coming in at 10th place, we have two wrestlers who would both have 9 points. So let's talk about on Will's list. They are number 12 for Will, Braun Breaker, and number 7 for Will, Seth Rollins, both coming in
Wow.
tied for the 10th spot. For reference, I had Braun Breaker at 11th, and I had Seth Rollins off my list.
You didn't have Seth at all.
Did not have
You're
Seth Rollins
crazy. You're
on my.
crazy. Are you serious? I was gonna put Seth higher. I was like Seth, but just because whatever. I just think Seth Rollins this year. I mean, we mentioned it in our top 5 matches, but he was like the MVP of that kind of. They still mention it, the MVP of WrestleMania. He had the main event of night one where he teamed up with Cody Rhodes. He
Mhm,
defended his title at the opener of night two, and then he comes out in the main event in Shield gear,
mhm,
absorbing the chair shot from Roman Reigns, which gave Cody Rhodes the opening to win the title. So that stuff was great, and I just loved his on-screen interactions with CM Punk. In the
mhm,
past with Seth Rollins, one of my issues was that he was too over the top. He was too much of this, he was the drip god or whatever. He'd come out all these goofy outfits. He'd come out with that laugh. But every time he went face to face with CM Punk, we got what felt like the real Seth Rollins. We got
mhm,
Colby Lopez in them, and he would just talk. When he just talks and he feels genuine, I listen. He's a great counter to a guy like CM Punk, and that whole feud that really should have taken place at WrestleMania, but unfortunately didn't
mhm.
because of CM Punk's injury. Uh, it was just it was great stuff. It was compelling television, and I'm glad that we're going to see it at the start of next year, as in the Netflix debut they will be going
Yes.
ahead. So I just need to give Seth Rollins a shout out because typically his stuff hasn't been interesting to me, but he was really just a great on-screen character. I know he had a bit of absence, but his absence was felt on Raw
For
when he
sure.
wasn't there, and then when he came back, it felt like he was, you know, deserving of being right in that title picture
Yeah.
against Damian Priest. So I just had to give him his props. He's always a solid hand in the ring, but really a great year for in ring segments with Seth Rollins. Also, that great segment he had with Bronson Reed, who we should give some acknowledgement to for having a
Yes.
great
Bronson Reed not on the list. Yeah, but definitely
out of the
deserving.
list, but definitely taking a huge step up in 2024 as well. Loved their feud when Seth Rollins came back, really elevating Bronson Reed, just showing what a guy like Seth Rollins can do for other talent that, needs to be
Yeah.
elevated on the card. So overall, just a really great year for Seth Rollins. Having him at number 7, shout out to him. But let's talk about the other guy who made the list, who also broke top rope takes,
Yes.
shattered our top rope takes world. Why don't you talk about the other number 10 spot, Braun
Okay.
Breaker?
Well, real quick, I need to defend not having Seth Rollins on my
Okay,
list.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You should do that. Yeah, you should do that
I
because
so here's my thing. Listen,
shocked.
Seth Rollins was not in my top 15. Um, I think Seth Rollins is one of the best professional wrestlers in the world. I think that's undisputed. If this was, again, his top 10 in ring worker, Seth Rollins is on there. But I need to look at the year as a whole and what have you done? And yes, the build up to WrestleMania and WrestleMania 40, Seth was great. Yes, he was hurt. But after WrestleMania, there has not been enough meat on the bone for me. Yeah, he had a good match slash program with Bronson Reed, and other than that, he's starting to pick up steam now with CM Punk. But there's been not much else. It was WrestleMania 40 and a match with Bronson Reed. And unfortunately, as far as good as Seth Rollins is, there are too many other guys who've been consistent all year doing PLEs, winning championships, being in main events that I just could not put Seth Rollins above these guys who are doing it day in and day out. And I know Seth Rollins is that kind of guy, and in 2025 will be that kind of guy. But in terms of 2024, injuries absolutely cost him. No doubt about it. Has not a reflection on his talent. But I cannot, in good conscience, put Seth Rollins for two matches above some of these other people.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends, I guess, on your criteria at that point. I feel like he was also an instrumental part in that build up to SummerSlam, being the special guest referee for Punk and McIntyre.
Yeah.
But I always, the way I kind of did my list, and yes, in ring quality, of course, always plays a factor, but mostly it's just my list simply comes down to if you're on my screen, how tuned in am
Yeah.
I for your segments? And when Seth Rollins was on screen, especially when it had to do with my guy CM Punk, who may make an appearance on the list, who knows? But I just felt that he was extremely compelling, more compelling than he's been in a while, in my opinion. And also his stuff when he was involved with the Rock and Roman Reigns and all that stuff, I thought was very great. I remember that promo he cut on Cody Rhodes where he was giving his reasons why Cody should challenge for the World Heavyweight title and not the WWE Championship. And I thought the way he delivered that
Mm.
was pretty impressive, considering that, a lot of people wanted to see Cody face Roman, and that did end up happening. But Seth Rollins making this argument that had people going, wait a second, maybe this could still work if that is the direction they went in. So I think segment wise, and then also his performance in the ring is, second to none.
Yeah.
He's still an incredible in ring wrestler, even though he didn't have as many matches as you'd want Seth Rollins to have per se. Being able to deal with some of the injuries that he's had over these past years and still be a compelling character is the reason why I have him on my list.
Well, let's talk about another guy that we both agreed upon was in our top 15. Kind of a shock to see him make the top 10 here, though. Braun Breaker coming in tied for 10th overall. Obviously, you mentioned it earlier. He broke top rope takes because for the life of us, we could never figure out if Braun Breaker was going to win or lose. Kind of an up and down year for sure. But I think it can't be understated how much he broke out in 2024. I think in NXT, everybody knew he was going to be, sorry, Brock Lesnar, but he was going to be the next big thing. Um, and I think he's really like shown in 2024 that like that is not just hype. I think he really is the real deal. He obviously wins the Intercontinental Championship twice in this year. He's on basically main eventing Raw on a weekly basis. Um, he's had some great PLE matches that we talked about. Um, I thought it was a hell of a year for Braun Breaker, and certainly I expect him to move up higher next year.
Yeah, no, he's going to be on this list a few times in the next couple of years. Braun Breaker, and really for me, 10 through 12 was kind of a tie
Yeah.
for 10th in a sense because when we were just limiting ourselves to a top 10, I was stuck between picking 10, 11, and 12 as my number 10. So I am glad that he did make it on the list. Yeah, just an awesome year for Braun Breaker. Just so many, we talk about moments, and anytime he hits a spear or it
Mm-hmm.
builds up any sort of momentum, it's a talked about moment the next day for in the wrestling community. People are replaying his spears, just how dynamic he is in the ring. It's always super entertaining. And we didn't mention this in our top matches, but I did in my top 10 have his match with Sheamus and Ludwig Kaiser
Yes.
in my top 10, long listed. Uh, because he was just a great foil in that match and had another incredible moment, an incredible spear to Ludwig Kaiser. And he just continues to make these moments and just have an explosive year in his first year on the main roster, already showing that this guy's a future main eventer.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about his Raw matches specifically, he's had great main events against Sami Zayn and Sheamus and Ilya and Ludwig Kaiser. His pay per view matches against Sami Zayn. So he's got a Jey Uso. Like he's got a lot of big matches under his belt this year, and I think I'm very happy to see him on this list. And can't wait to see what he does next year. Alrighty, so that is number 10. Again, a tie between Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker. Now, coming in at number 9. Let me get the list back up. All right, coming in at number 9, somebody we just recently mentioned. 13 points for this person. They were number 11 for Will and number 8 for me. It is Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn coming in at number 9. Let's talk about some of the highlights from Sami Zayn's year. Obviously, I think it all has to start with him winning the Intercontinental Championship from Gunther at WrestleMania 40, going on to defend that. And then, of course, his involvement into the whole Bloodline story, his tie in with Kevin Owens, of course, in that. Now he's going to program with Drew McIntyre. Sami Zayn has been on TV all year. He's won titles. He's had big matches. He's consistently in the main event storylines here. Even though he's not the cream of the crop, as this list shows, he's right up there with some of the biggest stars WWE has. And I think Sami Zayn's had a hell of a 2024.
Yeah, I think he's just a phenomenal babyface. We saw that in the build up to his match with Gunther. And then after that, kind of a slept on program that he had with him and Chad Gable. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like it was really well done. And it actually started Chad Gable's heel turn, which, another guy who maybe in the first half we thought maybe could have ended up on a top 10 in the second half, but they really just dropped the ball with him after that heel turn. But
Yeah.
their program together and their matches that they had were outstanding and definitely a highlight of 2024. Then you get into his program with Braun Breaker, again, fooling us. We thought maybe Braun Breaker would just destroy him and move on. No, they have a good back and forth kind of feud throughout the summer of 2024. And
Mm-hmm.
what really put Sami Zayn on this list for me was his involvement with the Bloodline once again. I
Oh,
feel like whenever
interesting.
he's around Jey Uso or any of the Bloodline stuff, and he
Mm-hmm.
had that fun little segment with Roman Reigns, I still feel like they could have done more with getting them back together. But that segment with Roman Reigns where he's like, you still like me, like I see you smiling there, Roman. I thought that
Yeah.
was all fun stuff. And I like the dynamic he's had recently about how, he might not like CM Punk, but he was forced to team with him because they had a greater enemy in this new bloodline and how that alignment with the OG bloodline and CM Punk affects his relationships with other wrestlers. I love when dynamics kind of cross over with characters in
Mm-hmm.
wrestling and it feels like it adds layers to each person's relationship on screen. So Sami Zayn is just a great element to that because he is so sympathetic to so many different sides. But maybe doesn't necessarily do what is right for him in his heart. So I'm curious to see how that plays out in 2025. But a great character and a great wrestler, deserving of being on this top 10.
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about Sami Zayn. Like you mentioned it too, like just a pure rootable babyface, which is really hard in 2024. Um, like that can't be understated how difficult it is to be universally loved, and he's found a way to do it. And again, I think for me when grading, I had him relatively high, in him eighth. So he definitely cracks my top 10. So about where he lands a little. I have him a little slightly higher, but either way, I think we're all in agreement. He deserves a place on this list. I love that he won the Intercontinental Championship, that he had a run, that he was constantly in the main event. He's constantly on TV. He was a workhorse for WWE this year, and I'm happy that he's getting the recognition finally. All righty. So that is Sami Zayn coming in the ninth place. Now we are on to number 8, and this might be, if you were upset about Seth Rollins, this might be the first one where we have an actual uproar. Because in eighth place, coming in with 15 points.
There's no way. You didn't
With,
do this to me, did you?
at eighth place, coming in
Okay.
with 15 points, he was number 12 on my list, not
Okay.
even in the top 10. And he was Will's fifth best wrestler.
Okay.
It is the tribal chief, Roman Reigns, coming in at number 8 for 2024. Obviously, Roman Reigns in any other year probably would be number 1. But in 2024, we saw his undisputed heavyweight championship historic reign come to an end. We saw him take a couple months off and return at SummerSlam. And now he's been thoroughly entrenched into this new bloodline storyline for the rest of the year. And obviously, on name value alone, it would be sacrilegious to not have him on this list. But for me, I had him at 12 because, as you'll see throughout this list, I'm rewarding consistency, championships, matches, and yes, he's the biggest star of them all. But aside from a WrestleMania 40 main event, I do not think he has done anything else this year that I will remember. Um, and I'm sure 2025 will be the polar opposite, but I think it's safe to say that 2024 was a down year for the tribal chief.
Yeah, what you just said is blasphemy. I just got to be honest. Like, we will have a debate. You're saying the main event of WrestleMania 40 was the only noteworthy thing he did in 2024 when he had the greatest comeback maybe of all time in WWE when he comes back at SummerSlam with that new music and he comes back and finally WWE gets the ooh-ah that they've been wanting to hear from 60,000 fans in Cleveland, Ohio, when he comes back to stop Solo Sikoa from winning the WWE Championship. To me, this was just, it's going to be a year where we look back at Roman Reigns in his career and we say this was the moment when Roman Reigns became the ultimate babyface superstar. This was the turning point for him. And this is how great his 2024 was. Even when he did take a break, he was still at the forefront of everyone's minds because every week on SmackDown, we want Roman. Dun, 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 dun. He was so, he just left such a mark throughout the past 3.5 years as champion that even when he wasn't on screen, he was still doing his thing as a top star without being there. So he had to be on this list for me. And going back to my criteria of who, if you're on screen, how locked in am I to anything you're doing? And anytime Roman's on screen, I am locked in with 3 locks. You could have 3 padlocks on it. My eyes are glued to the screen anytime he's doing anything. So had to have him on the list just for that factor alone. Yes, you're right. As far as matches go, didn't have that many. Maybe he had like 3, 4 matches, maybe. He definitely had a light year. I know he had one at Rumble. He had 2 at WrestleMania. He had the Bad Blood match and he had the War Games match. So maybe 5 or 6 mainstay matches, but all of those matches were talked about. All those matches were huge parts of 2024. So for me, and just his presence alone, had to put him on my top 10. And I'm glad that me putting him at 5 carried him up to this top 10 list.
Yes, Will had him at 5. I had him at number 12. I think we need to acknowledge the elephant in the room here. The bloodline stuff has been terrible since returning. I specifically on the solo end, and that's not Roman's fault. And I'm sorry that Roman's being punished for it, but it has been frankly a little boring since his return at SummerSlam because Solo is not a legitimate threat to him and has not been presented as such. And I think that hurts him a lot when that's his entire story for the last, half of the year, when he's kind of just like feels like almost like he's treading water with this storyline because I think everybody's just eager for it to be over and to see what they actually want him to do for WrestleMania. And I think that hurts him a lot.
Okay, I guess I could see where you would think that, but I put that more as like I punished that for Solo than I did punish that for Roman. I don't think Solo's making it on this list. Just a spoiler for everyone. No. I don't think Solo is making an appearance. So I think it was more so people saw that as, okay, this is because Solo isn't as compelling as he should be trying to go head up with the tribal chief because we've seen Roman literally have storylines in the past with people who we didn't necessarily think could step up to the tribal chief, and they made it somewhat compelling. I think about a storyline with LA Knight last year. I think about a storyline with Logan Paul 2 years ago. Like he's had storylines with people who you think, maybe this isn't going to go so well, but because Roman is able to elevate these people and make, something out of nothing, it's we kind of give it a break, I guess,
Hmm.
when we see someone not being able to step up their game when they go head to head with Roman Reigns. And I do think what helps Roman Reigns in this, and I'll bring it up again, is just the War Games build up. Yes, it was a little rushed, but I feel like he had compelling storylines with just people he was teaming with rather than the people he was facing in that War Games.
Yeah.
So yeah, just again, I think a great year for Roman as far as making that transition from dominant super heel champion to ultimate babyface that WWE has been wanting him to be for the past decade.
That actually brings a good point up that I wanted to talk about because you mentioned it in our other video too when we were talking about the best matches. Is that the formula for creating a babyface? Is it you have to be a heel first? Because if you look back at the history of wrestling, all your top baby faces ever, that is what has traditionally happened, is they have gotten over as a heel before they could become the biggest baby face possible. So I'm wondering your thoughts on that. Is that what the new formula going forward?
I don't think that has to be the case. I mean, I look at Cody Rhodes, who, when he returned, was a
Mm-hmm.
face and could have easily been turned on in that instance and
Mm-hmm.
remained a baby face throughout his career in WWE thus far. So I think it's just about if you're going to start as a babyface, it has to be organic. It
Yeah.
can't feel like it's forced upon the crowd.
Yeah.
And that's what Roman Reigns felt like. It felt like as soon as they broke up the Shield, there were so many missteps in there's the singles run of Roman compared to Seth and Dean, where it felt like Dean Ambrose had to claw for everything he got. It felt like Seth Rollins being in that heel kind of
Mm-hmm.
elevated his game, whereas Roman was given every big opportunity, and they still kept that Shield kind of aura or energy around him with keeping the theme song and having him come out in the crowd.
Yeah.
They made him like a one-man shield, and he really didn't define himself as a character until he became the tribal chief.
Right.
It felt like maybe if they had started with that kind of tribal chief style of character as soon as he broke off with the shield, maybe things would have been a little different. And then at that point, you would have gotten the babyface turn a
Yeah.
little earlier. But you know what? I'm not going to dwell on the past too much because ultimately they did find the formula for Roman, and now it's paid off in this year, which is why I had to have my top 10.
Absolutely. The tribal chief, we acknowledge you. Uh, and coming in at number 8 on our cumulative top 10 list. All righty, moving right along here. Coming in at number 7 with 18 points, he is my sixth wrestler of the year, and he is Will's eighth wrestler of the year. It is Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre, of course, main eventing to a degree WrestleMania 40 against Seth Rollins for the World Heavyweight Championship, where, lest we forget, Will, he won the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania. Now, he lost it 5 minutes later, but he was there. Drew McIntyre wins the world title at WrestleMania. He then has the feud with CM Punk that carries him throughout the year. He's got stuff with Jey Uso. He's got stuff with Sami Zayn. He's got multiple PLEs. His match with CM Punk and Hell in a Cell was one of our top 5 matches of the year. Spoiler alert, go watch that video to find out the other 4. A hell of a year for Drew McIntyre, consistently one of the biggest heels in the entire WWE. And I think it can't be understated how vital he was to the stories this year.
Yeah, he was awesome all throughout 2024. Definitely deserving of being in this top 10. I think back to 2023, where really after that Clash at the Castle match in 2022,
Mm-hmm.
he really felt like from that point up until 2024 and throughout 2023, it felt like he was kind of treading water. He didn't really know his place in WWE. There were even rumors of him leaving
Yes.
WWE to go to AEW. And then when CM Punk returns in late 2023, and you hear rumors of, Seth being mad or Drew storming off, they use that to kind of carry this storyline with CM Punk between both Drew and Seth, who have made our list. I
Mm-hmm.
wonder again if CM Punk will make this list. Who knows? But Drew being able to carry that into what started when they went back and forth on a promo, being like, I could kind of pass on this match, to being a match that everyone needed to see. And when Punk returned, it made the most sense for him to go into a program with Drew McIntyre right off the bat. So just throughout the year, having that feud with CM Punk and being really stepping up his game, being a compelling character in that storyline. Uh, I think it brought Drew up another level, basically to where he should be.
Mhm.
I was hoping that, after that Clash at the Castle match in 2022, that he would kind of stay a main event guy, but then he went into a feud with like Karrion Kross, and then it led to kind of a 2023 where he was kind of upper mid card, didn't really know his place. Now he is a bona fide main event star on the roster, and I think it was in thanks to this program he had with CM Punk, and again, what I will consider feud of the year for
Mhm.
2024. So definitely deserves to be on this list because anytime Drew was on screen, uh, being involved with his feud, I was paying attention, I was watching, and then of course his phenomenal match at Hell in a Cell, reinvigorating the Hell in a Cell stipulation. Got to give him credit to that. So yeah, Drew McIntyre definitely deserves to be on this list. I'm glad he made it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting. Rarely do you see somebody win the WWE Championship on multiple occasions and then actually take a step up from there. And I think that is what happened with Drew here because from a story perspective, I think he found his character. Um, and I've loved the stuff he's done with CM Punk this year. I'm excited to see what his current stuff with Sami Zayn goes and the stuff with Jey Uso. Also, another person that didn't make this list that I think I thought we didn't talk about at the top, but I think this is a nice tie into. Damian Priest had a good program with Drew McIntyre. Damian Priest had a hell of a year, winning the world title, Money in the Bank. I think he gets knocked a little bit for match quality and just overall investment in his character, but a great year from him as well. And I think a lot of that had to do with his program with Drew McIntyre, kind of solidifying both men. So, Drew, another feather in his cap. Yes, he's getting elevated by CM Punk, but also he's bringing up other people with him. Uh, Constantly involved in all the storylines in the main event of Raw this year. So you could make the argument he was the MVP of Raw in 2024, just from a consistency standpoint. And I think you would maybe get some pushback, but I think it's a fair argument to make. So happy he's on the top 10 list.
Yeah, and I'll acknowledge Damian Priest real quick because he did have a great 2024, but what took him off my list was just how kind of it was a weird transition for him to become babyface. And I think he had a decent few months with Gunther here and there, but once he was involved with the Judgment Day stuff, I feel like it kind of cooled off his momentum as a babyface. So definitely a breakout year for Damian Priest, but just not when I was talking about being compelling and it having to correlate with my list. I wasn't that locked into a lot of the stuff Damian Priest
Yes.
was doing on Raw.
He feels very similar to, as I just mentioned, where Drew McIntyre was a couple years ago when he won the world title. Yes, you're the world champion, and clearly the company has bookmarked him as for something bigger, but I don't think he's 100% gotten to the character that like a Drew McIntyre has gotten to, where like people, it feels authentic and people really buy into what he's selling. I think he will get there, so I'm excited for Damian Priest, but we're talking about Drew McIntyre, a hell of a year from him. I think he's going to continue to go upward. Hopefully, he can stay healthy, and I'm excited to see what he does in 2025. Alrighty, so quick recap of our list so far. So coming in at 10th place, we had a tie between the current Intercontinental Champion Braun Breaker and the Visionary Seth Rollins. In ninth place, we had Sami Zayn. In eighth place, we had the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns. And in seventh place, we have Drew McIntyre, which brings us to number 6. Coming in with 20 points, he was my third wrestler of the year, and he was Will's ninth wrestler of the year. It is the Ring General, the current world heavyweight champion, Gunther, coming in at number 6 here on our top 10 list. Let's talk about Gunther, Will. He's the current world heavyweight champion. He won that title at SummerSlam. He had an historic Intercontinental Championship reign end at WrestleMania 40 in a hell of a match. He's been on TV all year. He's currently been in the main event of every PLE since winning that World Heavyweight Championship, obviously. A cornerstone for the Raw division. Tell me more about Gunther.
Yeah, Gunther is awesome. And really, I feel like 6 is a good spot for him. I had him on 9 and might seem a little low. And that's only because I've seen better years from Gunther,
Mm.
specifically the past 2 years. I feel like the past 2 years he's had like a top 5 match of the year candidates. So it's almost like this is a weird comparison, but Nikola Jokic in the
Yes.
NBA, he wins the MVP 2 times. So there's almost like a standard set so that if he isn't performing at that level, he's may not get as many MVP votes as he did in the past 2 years. I feel the same way about Gunther, where he's already set such a standard for himself that even when he does have an amazing year like he
Mhm.
did in 2024, because it's not, the best year that he's ever had, it almost feels like a disappointment
Yeah.
because he did take a step up on the card as far as becoming the world heavyweight champion. He won King and Queen of the Ring. He won his
Yes.
King of the Ring tournament. Another great moment. Had an incredible match at WrestleMania 40 with Sami Zayn. So he did have a great, amazing year, but because he's had phenomenal years in the past with the Intercontinental Championship, I didn't feel like he took that next step up like I was expecting. And I am confident that in 2025 he will get those big time matches that he was looking for. It was just towards the end of 2024, it kind of felt like they were giving him mid card feuds with the world heavyweight title still. Like
Mhm.
when he was having matches with Damian Priest and Sami Zayn and Finn Balor and Damian Priest again. It just felt like I wanted him to have those matches with bigger opponents. He did have a match with Randy Orton at Bash in Berlin, but that wouldn't have happened had there not been a botch at King and Queen of the Ring.
Mhm.
So it almost felt like even it was like an accident that he had a big match against a big opponent. So I'm hoping in 2025 he gets those big matches against guys like CM Punk, Seth Rollins, John
Yes.
Cena. Hopefully we'll get that Goldberg match that we've been waiting for. Who knows? But I do think there's plenty of room for him to grow as a main eventer. And this was a great start for him, but ultimately fell a little shorter on my list because it's not the main event Gunther I envisioned when he did take that step up.
I think that's such an interesting argument because it's very similar to the argument that I just made for Roman Reigns a couple of minutes ago, which was I thought Roman Reigns is deserving, but like I thought that his program with Solo kind of dragged him down. And it sounds like it's kind of similar to what you're saying with Gunther, where we expect more from Gunther to be in more high profile matches, but he's working with the likes of the Finn Balor's, the Sami Zayn's, and the Damian Priest, these mid card guys. So it's like unfortunately I had to hold it against Roman. You got to hold it against Gunther here. I just know pound for pound, he might be my favorite in ring worker in WWE to watch. Every time Gunther is in the ring, I am very confident it's going to be an insanely good match. He's what I love about him is in a world right now in 2024 where pro wrestling is so much about the high spot and the acrobatics and the athleticism, and I love it. But he is such a throwback. He is so traditional. Everything he does looks real. There is no sports entertainment with him. He is like pro wrestling. Like he's just gonna chop the living daylights out of somebody. He's gonna hit a big boot. He's gonna hit a power bomb and a sleeper hold, and that's gonna be the match. I love watching his stuff. I think his promos are great. I think his character work is again another throwback to that foreign heel, but he does it in a way that's not offensive in 2024. That is just like he knows who he is. I am such a big Gunther fan. I know he's going to have an even better 2025. And again, I couldn't, I had him in number 3, so I couldn't give him the top spot, but he is the future. And yeah, a hell of a 2024 from the ring general.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to defend my placement of Roman Reigns above Gunther real quick because what I mentioned with Gunther, and I get where you're coming from, where it's the same argument, but Gunther has had those top 5 match candidates, and Roman Reigns did have a top 5 match candidate. He may have even had a number one. You'll have to find out, but go watch our video
Yeah.
that we put out yesterday. But just because of that moment and just the moments that Roman Reigns had throughout, even though he wasn't on TV as often and may have had like a slower storyline with the bloodline, it still felt top tier enough. And he was still rubbing shoulders with or rubbing elbows with main event talent. It still felt like he was a huge player in that and still maintained that momentum in 2024. Whereas Gunther, it felt like had momentum and it's kind of stalled out a bit. I feel
Yeah.
like he can definitely still take a step up. Roman Reigns still has all that momentum despite having a lackluster storyline with the new bloodline.
I fully expect Gunther, specifically the start of 2025, to start hitting those big main event guys, the CM Punks, the Seth Rollins, the John Cena's, the Goldbergs, the potentially even a Roman Reigns match somewhere down the line. So I fully expect him to start hitting those big matches. But I agree with you. Listen, at the end of the day, from a booking philosophy, like in order to build a dominant champion, you got to squash some bugs. And I think it would be really tough for him to start off his reign going against those guys because it's like, are you just going to squash them? And then, another thing we've talked about in the video, it's like with sometimes what AEW does, it's like you just give us the match we want right away and then don't build to it. And now we have all these matches that we're excited to see Gunther in while he's established himself as a dominant world champion with a little bit of reign underneath his belt. So I get that the first half of his reign hasn't been as exciting, but I think we're building to something really special here, and I'm so excited for Gunther.
100%. And that's why he'll end up in our top five for a
Yeah,
2025 list. But I just have to judge off of 2024. And I'm
correct.
not faulting them for doing it that way. I do
Mm,
think it's a good way to do it. But at the same time, I just have to look at 2024. And in a vacuum, it feels like Gunther can definitely, he's,
yeah,
working above his pay grade right now. I feel like he's got to, I don't know if that was the right term, but, he's got to match what level he's worthy of.
yes.
And even though I get that they're building him up for this thing, I can't wait to see in 2025, like you said, him face that main event talent. And if he does have those main event matches, I have no doubt in my mind that he'll end up higher on next year's list.
Absolutely. All right, so that does it for Gunther at number 6, your current world champion. So now we are officially into the top 5 wrestlers of 2024, Will. And coming in at number 5 with 21 points, he was my 7th ranked wrestler of the year, and he was Will's 4th ranked wrestler of the year. The first representative from AEW, it is Mr. Bryan Danielson coming in at number 5. Bryan Danielson highlights from this year include obviously winning the AEW World Championship from Swerve Strickland at All In. Really, a couple great matches against the likes of Will Ospreay, John Moxley, to just name it through. Swerve Strickland, of course. Obviously, you had him a little bit higher at number 4, Will. So talk to me about the American Dragon.
Yeah, really like a career year for Bryan Danielson. We mentioned his outstanding performance at All In, another great performance against Will Ospreay at Dynasty. I also want to give a shout out to his Owen Hart final match with Hangman Page because
Mm-hmm.
I was really on the edge of my seat thinking, oh, Hangman's probably going to win this. But the back and forth that these two had, and it really felt like I could go either way. And I was definitely shocked in the moment that Bryan Danielson ended up winning that Owen Hart tournament final. They had a great match um at on that episode of Dynamite. Definitely one of the better Dynamite matches I've seen. Maybe not the best. Again,
Mm-hmm.
well, we talked about that in the top 5 matches. Again, go check that out. But
Mm-hmm.
just a great I feel like this was when Bryan Danielson joined. This was kind of what we wanted to see from him uh since his involvement in AEW. Just
Yeah.
having outstanding matches, just being like a complete rock for AEW. You can always rely on him to deliver. He also had a great match with Eddie Kingston at
Mm-hmm.
Revolution. Want to give a shout out to that match as well. So yeah, I mean, he's just a great wrestler. There's not much more that can be said other than he's a great wrestler and he had great wrestling matches all throughout the year. That's why I had to put him in my top 5, simply put. And there is bias because he is one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah.
And it was just great to see him have that standout year and finally win the championship at AEW. It almost felt like when he joined, it was losing left and right, losing matches to like Daniel Garcia. I felt like, man, this guy's never going to put himself
Right.
on top because he really did have that power to become champion, but he just was like, no, I like having matches and putting over these young guys. I'm glad that he just finally won the title and was the top guy that AEW needed in that moment.
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting year for Bryan Daniels. Certainly one of the biggest of his career. So obviously I put him at 7th, I believe, is what I said. And so he doesn't. I'm a little lower on him than you are. I think the fact that he won the world championship, has had consistently great matches, and it has had incredible, memorable moments this year, certainly makes him deserving of a spot on this list. The negative I would say for Bryan Danielson is I just don't think the consistency was there compared to some of the other guys we've been talking about, as far as day in, day out, being involved on TV, being involved in the pay-per-views, and just like the other, like I feel like he's very top heavy in 2024, where there are like a couple moments that like stand out as like really great, and then it's a kind of a lot of like what else did he do the rest of the year. Um, so that's why I had him lower, but obviously as low as 7 is pretty impressive considering the field that we've been talking about and the people who haven't made it. So that's why I had Danielson a little bit lower, but you can't ignore the fact that his highs were insanely high and compared to anybody else on this list.
Yeah, and I will say this when I was doing my list, I do have a bit of different criteria when I'm putting AEW wrestlers on this list versus WWE because AEW is very focused on telling stories in the ring.
Yeah.
So it felt like even though the reason why I have a lot of WWE guys high on my list is because of the moments, the segments. They might have had one or two great matches, but it was more of their presence on screen that drove them as high as they were on the list. Whereas AEW, because it's story driven in the matches, I had to base it off of who had the best quality matches in AEW. And Danielson was right up there with the best that AEW had to offer. And not only that, but for a company that doesn't do a lot of high profile segments, he did have an awesome go home segment with Swerve Strickland where he dropped the F bomb. And he's like, some people forgot that I'm the best wrestler in the world. I'm going to
Yeah.
show them at All In. That was just a great moment for Bryan Danielson. It made me feel like Bryan Danielson is back. And,
Yeah.
it was just an exciting moment for him. And then leading into his All In match, just a great year for Bryan Danielson. And probably, I would say, his best year in AEW.
Oh, for absolutely best year in AEW, no question. I think when you compare him to some of the other like true main eventers we talked about, like the Gunthers and the Roman Reigns, I think the difference is that his highs were so high, and that there were a little bit more of them. Yeah, obviously, like we just talked about Gunther winning the world title. Danielson also won the world title this year, but I think because of when Danielson won the world title, it was a great match as well, but it was against a high profile opponent on a big event, and it just felt like a grander, bigger win. And I think that does do a lot when you're thinking in retrospect to 2024, of just how monumental from a fan's perspective the moments were. So Bryan Danielson at number 5. Now we are heading to number 4, coming in at 25 points. He was my number 4 wrestler of the year, and he was Will's number 3 wrestler of the year. Again from
Oh,
AEW,
no.
Will Ospreay coming
No.
in at
What?
number 4.
Boo. Big boo. What were we thinking? We suck. Oh my
Tell me about it.
gosh.
Will Ospreay, number 4. No, hey, no world title wins this year. Just consistently being the best wrestler on the planet, and that'll get you to 4th place in our list. But obviously, you got a big reaction. Tell me why Will Ospreay deserves to be higher.
Well, I put him there because I thought were going to have him at number one. So I was like, I could get some leeway putting him at number three. But you having him at number four makes me feel bad that I even had him at number three. Because really, if we're going by the best wrestler of 2024, just wrestling, he is number one.
Oh,
He is,
100%.
it's no question that he is number one. I, oh man, we're going to have an argument here coming up about because I know who you put ahead of him, and I totally disagree. But Will Ospreay, just the volume of great quality matches for Will Ospreay. I I think four is pretty low for him, but again, I put him at three, so I'm partially to blame. I can't fully fault myself. I may have rigged the voting a little bit to try to get a
Yeah.
certain someone higher, but uh yeah, Will Ospreay. I mean, there's not much you could say other than just a phenomenal wrestler and really showed. It was really like AEW's era in 2024. We're gonna look back at the highs of the 2024 era of AEW and be like, Will Ospreay was at the forefront of that. This guy really was at the face of AEW and what AEW means in 2024. About they say we're the best wrestle. The reason why they adopted that catchphrase to me is because they have Will Ospreay on their roster
Yeah.
because that it is where the best wrestle when it comes to guys like Will Ospreay. and Okada and Bryan Danielson and someone else who might make the list, who I totally disagree is not ahead of Will Ospreay, but we'll get into it. Just a great year for Will Ospreay, and I think he's going to continue to make moments and have incredible matches heading into 2025. I'll just go down the list real quick. MJF versus Will Ospreay, Bryan Danielson versus Will Ospreay. We mentioned Josh Alexander versus Will Ospreay, Michael Oku versus Will Ospreay, Ospreay versus Takeshita, Ospreay versus Pac, Ospreay versus Ricochet, Ospreay versus Claudio. Even last night when we're recording this, 2 nights ago when this comes out, Ospreay versus Darby Allin was incredible. So just a great 2024 throughout, very consistent. I'm surprised based on your criteria that you didn't have him higher, but let's hear from you, Jason. Why is he number 4 on this list?
Will Ospreay is the greatest wrestler in the world. Let me get that out there first and foremost. But there is more to wrestling than just in ring quality. You got to give me moments. You got to give me titles. You got to give me stakes. You got to give me uh, things that I'm going to look back on and remember more than, oh, that was a pretty good match. Will Ospreay is my favorite wrestler in the world. That is obviously why he is this high. But I think, to no fault of his own, he deserves to be in the world title picture. I think it's hard for me to put him over people who are winning world titles and main eventing PLEs or pay per views when he's consistently, yes, the best match on the card, but he's also consistently in the middle of the card. Will Ospreay is undoubtedly like the modern day Shawn Michaels. He's the next second coming of Bryan Danielson, in my opinion. But we're getting to the top of the top here. We're getting to the people that have carried companies. And yes, and to a degree, and from the in-ring perspective, yes, you could argue that Will Ospreay has carried AEW, but he has not been their champion. So it's hard for me to put him above people who have been main eventing. I'm listen. Should he be in that spot? Absolutely, he's deserving of that spot. But he hasn't been. He worked Roderick Strong at Double or Nothing. Like it's just like, and that's not his fault. That's a booking thing. But when you look at 2024 as a whole, it was an absolutely incredible year in ring for Will Ospreay. But to be fair to Will Ospreay, every year is an incredible year in ring for Will Ospreay. What is going to do separate Will Ospreay from me is when he finally gets his spot at the top of the card, the undisputed world champion of whatever company he's in, and he didn't do it this year. Um, I think that he has, you know, he rivals any wrestler from any generation from an in ring perspective. But I can't, listen, he's my guy, but he's got to be number 4.
All right, so I didn't realize this was a kayfabe list, so I get where you're coming from, and he's got to be a main event. I get all that, but I feel like because the reason why I have him so high is because even though he was booked as a mid carder, he made everything feel like a main event. He made everything feel like it was gonna. You know what? You're not gonna give me the main event. Well, guess what? I'm gonna make it so that the main event has to step up their game because of how great my match was earlier in the card. That's how I felt about Will Ospreay all year. Is because no matter what match he had, besides really All In, if Will Ospreay had a match on a show, it was what people were talking about the next day. So that's why I have him at 3. Now I'm thinking I should have put him higher, but you know what? I like him at 3 just because like you said, maybe on the microphone, he is a great promo, but wasn't as good of a promo or a compelling promo as the 2 guys I put ahead of him. But as far as in-ring stuff, he is the best wrestler in the world right now, Will Ospreay.
Unequivocally, the best wrestler in the world. And also, I want to make it clear here that he is tied.
Okay. Okay. So it's tie. It's a tie for 3. That's how that works, Jason. 3. It's a third place tie. Let's make that clear.
Yes. But we talked about Will Ospreay.
That makes me feel a little better. That makes me feel a little better. Okay.
Yes. He is tied for 3rd with 25 points. Before we talk about the person he's tied with, any final thoughts on Will
Ospreay? He's great. I'm actually gonna take this time to talk about someone who didn't make the list.
Okay.
Who had a great match with Will Ospreay and someone who was definitely my top 5, maybe not only just for 2023 last year, but my top 5 maybe since 2019. And that's a guy, MJF.
Yeah.
I want to talk about him real quick because his absence from this list does sort of bother me. It felt like when he finally came back and re-signed with AW, he really should have had he should have been the face. He should have had a rocket ship on his back and
Yeah.
been the guy that they build the company around. And instead, he's kind of had these like I enjoyed his stuff with Will Ospreay. I thought it was very fun when he won the international championship, made it the All American title. Um, that stuff was fun, but it was only for like 2 months. Then he had this weird program with Daniel Garcia
Yeah.
that kind of didn't really do anything for either guy. And now he's back involved with the stuff with Adam Cole, which I feel like could have just been left with in the past. He's been such an exciting presence on AEW and really for a while was the reason why I continued to tune into AEW week after week was to see what MJF was going to do on the show. And now, since he's made his return in May, it hasn't really felt that way. And I just hope in 2025 he could kind of once he's done with this stuff with Adam Cole, which is coming to an end, hopefully at World's End, that he can get back in that main event title picture and be the MJF that we all know he can be.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, it's a shame he's not on this list. I think it's more reflective on, it's so interesting. I was gonna say it's more reflective on AEW, but the reality is on all these lists, AEW has had the majority of matches. They've had a majority of, we're gonna have a couple wrestlers, at least one more to talk about here. So it's like it's such an interesting dichotomy because we're saying they're putting on great matches and they have great wrestlers and great women superstars as well, and yet the quality is significantly worse. And I'm not sure where the disconnect is. But certainly MJF has suffered from it. I mean, MJF, not even the only other big name from AEW on this list. There's no Hangman Page. There's no John Moxley. Um, there's a lot of the heavy hitters in AEW just couldn't even crack our top 10 here. We got a couple of them, but certainly the minority. So I'm interested to talk about like what MJF's uninclusion from this list, what kind of like referendum that has on AEW as a whole.
Yeah, it's definitely something to look to for 2025, but I think it just has to do with that compelling storytelling. And there's few guys who are able, since they do like to tell their stories in the ring, there are few guys who are able to execute that well. And those few guys are like Will Ospreay or Brian Danielson. Like they're able to tell stories in the ring. So if you're not able to do that and you're not able to put on those compelling matches that can also drive a story forward, MJF is one of those guys, but he just hasn't had that opportunity in his
Yeah.
feuds to do that per se. Um, if you're not able to do that, then you got to break it down to your in-ring time as far as promos. And I'm not really a fan of the way AEW does stories, like as far as backstage stuff, or I just I feel I know people do like this Chris Jericho character, but I feel like giving him
I do
TV
like it.
time and calling it
Yeah,
TV time, it is taking away from other stories that could use that time
I agree.
to it just feels like me. I'm glad that now they're kind of giving him a spot on ROH. Just have him be on ROH and do his thing. And, people who want to see it will see it, and people who don't want to see it don't have to see it. So I hope that AEW can focus on the talent that made AEW what it is
Mhm.
rather than what it was.
Right. No, I agree with you. They have so much potential. Hopefully, they can course correct in 2025. But to get back on track here a little bit, we're talking AEW. We mentioned Will Ospreay is in a tie for third place with 25 points. The person he is in a tie with is none other than our number three wrestler of 2024, Mr. Swerve Strickland. Now, Swerve came in at number 6 for Will and number 1 for me.
Wow.
Swerve Strickland, my top wrestler of 2024, and I'll tell you why. He's got everything that I've been talking about. He's been world champion and held it for a while. Great matches, great moments. He's had been consistently at the top of their card since January. There's everything that you look for in a wrestler. He's up there with Will Ospreay in terms of in ring ability. I think if you put him in there with anyone, he's going to be great. And so that is why I had him at number 1. Was because of all the factors that I found important. Like I said, in ring, moments, resume, credentials. What am I going to remember? Swerve Strickland had it all. And so that is why he's my number one wrestler in the world. You obviously had him a little bit lower, and he ends up as number three on our list, tied with Will Ospreay. So I gave my reasons. Talk to me about Swerve Strickland's year.
Yeah, well, he definitely deserves a top five spot for sure. And I did go back and forth on where to put Swerve on this list, but I just had to be honest about how I felt about Swerve compared to some of these other wrestlers. And I don't want to be too down on Swerve because this really was a breakout year for Swerve. We saw like kind of hints of that at the end of 2023. Like
Yeah.
2024 could be the year for Swerve Strickland. And his feud with Hangman Page was awesome.
Yeah.
Like, let's just make that clear. Another top feud of the year, maybe the best feud in AEW of
Undoubtedly.
2024. Just their back and forth was awesome. And I liked how, it started with Hangman as the good guy, Swerve as the bad guy, and then kind of flipped. And
Mm-hmm.
you saw it change in Hangman, where it's like it felt like the people turned his back on him because this guy who did all this sick stuff is now gaining liking to the fans, and fans are starting to get on his side, which definitely irked Hangman Page. So I loved that feud all throughout 2024. Him winning the world championship was an important moment for AEW. Um, and he was able to prove why. And it's funny because when he first stepped into AEW all those years ago, I don't think
Yeah.
people expected him to be at this level. And so for him to
No.
take that step up and be one of the top guys in AEW is incredible. I think where he fell short for me personally was just as far as his presence on screen, how locked in am I to Swerve Strickland? And he is a good promo. But when I compare him to a guy that I put ahead of him, for example, Roman Reigns, I am
Mm-hmm.
fully locked into everything Roman Reigns does, every little mannerism he does. Swerve doesn't necessarily do that for me. And this is just a personal thing because I know he
Yeah.
does that for a lot of people. But when he is telling stories, something about the way he speaks or the way he talks just doesn't connect for me. It happens for a lot of people. I'll say the same
Yeah.
thing about a Gunther, for example.
Yeah.
Gunther has his moments, but Gunther as a promo, doesn't necessarily have me locked in at every single moment. And it's just something about Swerve that I just don't necessarily connect with all the way. I think he does have
Right.
his moments as a promo. I think he can, again, when he was doing the stuff with Hangman, is very compelling, but just doesn't connect with me as much. In ring, totally on the same page with you. One of the best in ring wrestlers AEW has and always shows out in any match that he has in AEW, as given by him being well, you'll have to find out in the match or top
Yeah.
five match
Yeah.
list, but he, may have
He's
made an
up there.
appearance. He's up there. So yeah, I think he does deserve to be in the top five, but me personally putting him at six is just about how locked in I am when he comes on screen.
Yeah.
Not necessarily as um
Right.
I guess eye gluing as some of the other
Yeah.
names I have on the list.
And that's what I think makes this so interesting is because the criteria is so subjective. I did not try and look at this with a bias. I'm not saying you did. I'm just saying I didn't try and look at this as like who are my favorite wrestlers. I was literally just trying to be objective and be like, look at those, like compare resumes and who's had the best year. And I think, for all the reasons I've already stated, the championships, the matches, the moments, the stakes, the consistency. This is why Swerve is my number one. Um, and I think it's so interesting too, because I think out of anybody on this list, top 10, top 15, hell, I could go as far as top 20, top 25. Of all our people on that list, I think he's the most surprising person if we were to look back from a year from now and go, did you think Swerve Strickland was going to be on your top 10 wrestlers of all in the all pro wrestling last year? Probably not. Um, and so to think that he's gotten so high as to number three on our cumulative list is such a testament to not only Swerve Strickland, but AEW's boldness to really hand him the ball and let him run with it for their company. I think was a great decision. Certainly a big moment for pro wrestling. Let's just call it what it is. You do not see a lot of Black World Champions carrying companies, and he has done that for AEW for a full calendar year. Yes, he had other people like Brian Danielson and John Moxley and Will Ospreay and MJF who are great supporting cast and great dance partners, but he has been the focus of their men's division for the entire calendar year. And for that reason, and plus the in-ring work, I had to put Swerve number one.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're doing, because I see how you're doing it like objectively, like an all around kind of resume. This one, I was more so, I put in my own bias about how much I enjoyed these wrestlers throughout the year
Yeah,
for one reason or another. And even though Swerve did have a breakout year, I just didn't connect with him as much as other people did, per se. But you do got to give him his fun. That's why I had him as high as 6, is because he still had an incredible year that's undeniable. Like you
yeah,
have to acknowledge how great of a year Swerve Strickland had and the turnaround he had from his opening in AEW, his debut to now. I mean,
yeah,
it's a complete 180 from where he started to where he
yeah.
is right now.
And last thing I want to say is both criteria are correct. The way you did your rankings, the way I did my rankings, that's what makes it so fun. That's what makes it so interesting because that is wrestling. That is wrestling fans. Everybody's like you had said, everybody's got different flavors of ice cream of what they like and what they look for. And I think that is what something to be celebrated, not divisive. So Swerve Strickland, hell of a year, comes in at number 3 on our top 10. It's time now to get to our top 2. And coming in at number 2, let me pull the list up. Wouldn't that help? With 26 points. He is my 5th wrestler of the year, and he is Will's number 1. It is the Second City Saint, CM Punk, at number 2 in 2024. Will, I can't think of anybody else that I'd rather talk about CM Punk. So go ahead. The floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah. CM Punk, CM Punk, CM Punk. No, no, no. I had to look. I realistically, if I'm being completely honest with you, maybe could have been lower on my list, but I knew I had to give him all of my points. I had to put all of the chips in the center for
As you
CM Punk to get him as high as he could possibly be on this top 10 list because as I said, the criteria for me is how locked in was I during their segments. And even when he was hurt, even when he was recovering from an injury, his first year back in WWE was one that will be talked about forever because no one thought it would happen in a million years. When he left in 2014, went on the podcast, started talking all this crap, then went over to AEW, thought this was his home. This is where he'll be. He doesn't need WWE. This is where he's going to be. Ultimately, now culminating in his return last year and having a full year. Obviously, things could have gone a lot better for him had he not gotten injured. But every time Punk had a segment or had a match or had anything to do on screen with WWE, I was in for it. And he's just such a compelling talker. He knows what to say. There's something magic about CM Punk cutting a promo in the middle of the ring, even when he's doing what people will call a generic babyface promo. He
yeah,
does the generic babyface promo better than anyone in wrestling right now because he's able to do it in a way that feels real. It feels like it's coming from the heart. Uh, so just those moments. And then also what really put CM Punk on the top of this list was his interactions with other wrestlers. As I mentioned before on this list, um, Seth Rollins, when it felt real, like their back and forth felt real from the beginning of the year when they had a promo to now, most recently, when they've gone face to face with each other. Drew McIntyre, which I've discussed, has been a feud of the year. But I want to talk about a moment that might lead into 2025 with maybe my favorite back and forth segment of the year. And that was when CM Punk stood across the ring from a certain somebody. And I don't want to say his name because he might end up being on this list. But
copy.
their back and forth
Mm,
was absolutely incredible, claiming that these two were alike in what they are trying to represent.
mm,
And it was a great lead in to the Royal Rumble, and it was a fantastic segment throughout, like just really planting that seed for what's to come in WWE, something to look forward to. You also had his moment with Paul Heyman at SmackDown in Chicago, which I thought was a phenomenal moment in 2024, which then played out later in War Games when he joins to team up with the Bloodline. And I thought all of that stuff was super compelling as well, coming off of his hot feud with Drew McIntyre, finally reuniting with Paul Heyman, which I think is something that was on a lot of people's bucket list for things for CM Punk to do, reunite with Paul Heyman. And the fact that it came hand in hand with him teaming with the Bloodline,
Mhm.
it just made it for a lot of interesting stuff that we will also see play out in 2025. So he did so much stuff that was compelling in 2024 that also made me look forward to stuff in 2025. It felt super well rounded. And yes, he didn't have that many matches, but even though he had few matches, his batting average was pretty high,
Yeah.
considering that one of the matches he had was a top match for us in 2024, that being with Drew McIntyre at Hell in a Cell. So I had to put CM Punk number one at this list because I am a CM Punk mark, and I will acknowledge all bias in my list by putting CM Punk number one.
Yeah, listen, I can't help fault you for that. CM Punk is one of the biggest stars WWE has for a reason. He's a huge draw. Whenever he's on the microphone, whenever he's on TV, it's must watch television. It's captivating, it's engaging. You're locked in, as Will says. And the match quality has been there this year as well. Despite the quantity, the quality has been great. So I am not mad at CM Punk at number two. Um, do I had him at number 5 in my personal list for the reasons that I've gone over throughout this podcast, but I think you can't deny star power. I think it's so interesting to watch CM Punk's career. It is unlike any other career I don't think I've ever seen in pro wrestling. From the only thing I could compare it to is Shawn Michaels before he found religion, where he had his demons for different reasons, a lot of controversy, but the best in the ring. And now this feels like his return to WWE feels eerily similar to Shawn Michaels' return to WWE in like the early 2000s, where we were getting a different version of CM Punk now. And I think we're going to get the potentially the best version. Granted, he's older than Shawn was in 2002, so I don't know how much his body can hold up, but I have a feeling CM Punk is going to course correct a lot of his legacy in the next coming years. And I think the best is yet to come for CM Punk. We got a lot of great stuff from him in 2024. I think what's going to hurt him in the future is I think he's not going to physically be able to do the schedule that a lot of these other wrestlers are going to be able to do. And he shouldn't, for what it's worth, because he's an attraction. I don't think you can have CM Punk be on television wrestling every week like a Will Ospreay and doing the house shows and being on every PLE. He needs to be treated like a Brock Lesnar was in, like 2014 and all those years past. He needs to be treated like Roman Reigns is currently. And I think that will hurt him on future rankings. But as far as star power, he is up there with the very top of the industry. And yeah, he had an incredible 2024 despite no championships. He had great matches, he had great moments, he's engaging. I cannot hate on CM Punk at number 2. If that is where we have agreed to put him, I'm totally fine with that. It was, CM Punk is one of one, and I am so excited to see what 2025 has for him.
Yeah, and I do think, unlike Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns, I do think he should have that part-time schedule. I agree with you there, but I think unlike them, he could still have a presence on screen that will still put him at the top of any end of your list. Because when Brock would do his match, he would do his match and then go away, and you
Yeah,
could still have Paul Heyman kind of carry him on the mic because he could still be a presence on screen, kind of represent Brock in that sense. With
right.
Roman, it's almost like the absence is part of the character. Him
Yes,
leaving because he only wants to fight in certain instances. CM Punk can still be a presence on screen just by cutting promos or doing outside
right.
stuff. He doesn't have to necessarily be competing in matches, but that doesn't also mean that he has to do a match, go away, do a match, go away. So I do think even if he does have to resort to a part-time schedule, which we both agree is better for CM Punk, and I do, knock on wood, pray that he has good health in 2025 because I do
Yeah,
want to see him have a full year in WWE being able to compete against top stars. And I know CM Punk deep down would want to have more matches than he did this past year. But ultimately, we talked about his age. He is winding down, I would say, in his career, despite just only returning last year.
yeah.
So I do think a part-time schedule will help elongate his time in WWE, but I think as is proven by this year and him being hurt, he could still be able to have those incredible segments, that magic promo,
Yeah.
and be able to land so high on our top 10 list. He's number 2 for us. So
Right. Yeah, I think if you were to book him similarly to like the way they're booking Randy Orton currently, I think that's the biggest, best way to do it is, bring him. But the difference is, I don't think CM Punk needs to be having these like throwaway matches on television the way Randy Orton does. I think you really only need him for the PLEs. That would be my only advice for his booking going forward. But as far as his work in 2024 goes, incredible, some of the best of his career, and yeah, absolutely deserving of number 2 on our list.
yeah, and shout out to Randy Orton, by the way. He didn't make our list, but he did have a great 2024. Just shows how stacked 2024 was. Came back all jacked looking.
Yeah, it's all
It
that
was
Nutella,
incredible.
brother.
And yeah, he looking great. And who knows if he gets in those higher profile matches
Mhm.
like people suspect he will in 2025. You never know where Randy Orton could land come next year.
This could easily have been a top 30 list, and I think it would have been hard to figure out.
Yeah.
All right, so that does it. We have one more person left to talk about. The number one wrestler in 2024, according to both Will and I. Ironically, he was number 2 for both of us, but he is getting the number 1 spot. It is the current WWE Undisputed Champion, Cody Rhodes, at number 1 with 28 points. Will, I feel like Cody Rhodes just kind of goes without saying. When you are the quarterback of the number 1 wrestling promotion in the world and have been all year and have been in the main event all year and have carried the world title for 8 months of the year, it is hard to put you any lower than where he is right now. I think there is certainly an argument to be made that his stories and his in-ring work have not been up to the par of some of the other people below him on this list. But at the end of the day, like I said, when you are the guy for the company, it's hard to not put you at number 1.
Yeah, we could talk about, how great Will Ospreay is as a wrestler. We could talk about how this was a breakout year for Swerve. We could talk about how compelling CM Punk was throughout the year. But when we look back at 2024, this is the year of Cody Rhodes. So I am
Yes.
happy that he got the number 1 spot. Really my objective number 1, had it not been for my CM Punk bias, he would have definitely been my number 1 wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
So I am glad he got the number 1 spot on our combined list. Just he had the moment of the decade. Let's just be
Yeah.
real. He had the moment of the decade when he won the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 40, knocking off Roman Reigns' 1,316 long day as champion. It was something to behold. It was a moment that none of us really could have seen coming, even though it felt so obvious because of just the trauma we went through 3.5 years
Yeah.
of, is this the time Roman's going to lose? The fact that in a match that felt so obvious that Cody was going to win, it still had us on the edge of our seat. And it just really it reiterated how powerful Cody Rhodes is as a modern day babyface when in the beginning of the year, it seemed like The Rock was going to take his spot away. And the fans really showed their true colors. They disliked the video when The Rock came back.
Yep.
Everywhere they go, we want Cody. And it got to the point where WWE, for lack of a better phrase, had to acknowledge that these fans wanted to see
Yeah.
Cody versus Roman more than The Rock versus Roman, which is insane to say
Insane.
out loud because The Rock is literally the biggest star, not just in wrestling, in the world. Like
Yeah.
he is the biggest star. And so the fact that the fans went, no, we don't want that match. We want our guy. We want
Yeah.
Cody. And it really shows, like when you were mentioning before, like the formula for making a baby face. And I think typically people would say, you're right. You should start as a heel and then grow likable as a heel to the point where you become a baby face. I think Cody Rhodes is just such a strong baby face that he's able to overcome that. He's able to change how we look at a
Mm-hmm.
baby face in wrestling,
Yeah.
where if you are just genuine enough, you're honest enough, and the fans really see your hustle and grind for years, whether it was inside WWE or outside creating AEW and getting fans that way. He just is so likable. He's such a great face for WWE, and it was a face that was chosen by the fans. And I
Mhm.
think it's something that WWE hasn't necessarily had in a really long time, where the fans truly chose this guy to be the face of WWE, and it wasn't force fed to us in a way that, sometimes it'll be almost WWE fans rebelling where they'll choose a guy who's a really good heel
Yeah.
and just really enjoy them to the point where WWE has to turn them face. No, this was a guy that WWE introduced as a face. People loved them, and they were able to tell this story with him going on a ride to finishing the story, culminating at WrestleMania. So he has to be number one, and
Yeah.
I'm glad he got that spot on our list.
Yeah, 100%. There's not, I mean, and listen, I could talk about Cody Rhodes at nauseum, but it's just, it's so, this was, again, the year of Cody Rhodes. You think about how the year started with him winning the Royal Rumble and not really knowing where that was going to happen. And then his road to WrestleMania that you just talked about, finishing the story, the big moment at WrestleMania 40, and then holding on to that title, going through the bloodline, going through AJ Styles, another guy who unfortunately got hurt this year, but I could very well be on this list next year. Cody Rhodes is the number one guy, the number one company, and I think that's really all there is to say.
Yeah, and now that I can finally mention it, my favorite in-ring segment still, it happened in January, still remains my favorite in-ring segment of 2024. CM Punk and Cody Rhodes going face to face. When
Yeah.
Cody Rhodes or CM Punk goes, "I'm more of the American dream than you are," and Cody Rhodes cuts that promo that it was kind of reminiscent of his promo when he was leaving AEW, when
Mhm.
he goes down the list of things that CM Punk said in the pipe bomb, and Cody Rhodes being the one to do those things and being able to say to CM Punk's face, "I am more CM Punk than you are," was just it was an ultimate pipe bomb for Cody Rhodes.
Mhm.
It was, I can't wait to see them eventually have like a
Oh, it's
real
gonna be
feud in
incredible.
WWE. It's going to be money. Maybe it's something that they can hold on to for as long as they want. And
Yeah.
whenever they need to pull the trigger on it, just go for it and
Mhm.
it'll be money. So Cody Rhodes definitely deserving of that number one spot. As you mentioned, maybe cooled off a bit throughout the year, but ultimately was still the champion and still someone who, anytime he's on screen, I got to see
Mhm.
what he's doing.
Yeah. So that does it. That is our top 10 list of the male wrestlers in all of pro wrestling for 2024. Let's do a quick recap here. Of course, coming in at number one was the WWE Undisputed Champion Cody Rhodes. Number two, CM Punk. Number three, Swerve Strickland. Tied with third place at technically number four was Will Ospreay. Number five, Brian Danielson. Number six, Gunther. Number seven, Drew McIntyre. Number eight, Roman Reigns. Number nine, Sami Zayn. And tied for 10th place was Braun Breaker and Seth Rollins. Will, any final thoughts on our list?
It's a solid list. I think, yet again, as I kind of suspected, we did have a lot of disagreements, more
Mm,
disparity than some of our other lists.
yeah.
But ultimately, we got the number one right. And I'm
Mm.
glad my guy CM Punk ended up so high on the list. I'm glad
Yes.
I was able to carry him up to the number two spot.
Rig the voting.
So ultimately, look, hey, recount the votes.
I
It was
agree. It was
no,
fair. It's fair.
no. But again, just
Mm,
a solid list. And I do think no matter where you put these guys, these were the defining 10 or 11 guys of 2024. You put these guys, you can put them all on like a Hall of Fame kind of display for what 2024 represents.
yeah.
And all of these guys should be on it. And they're well represented throughout this list.
All right. Before we wrap up here, I want you to give me two names. Give me a name of somebody who is not on our top 10 list who you think will be on the top 10 this time next year. And then I want you to give me a name of somebody who could be on this list that you think will be the number one next year. And I will do the same.
Okay. So, hmm, okay. I think this time next year, hmm, I
There's
think
a,
honestly, I really want this to be the case, just deep down in my heart. I want to see John Cena on the top 10. I
there we
want him to
go.
have an
Yes.
awesome farewell tour to the point where we're saying he needs to be on this top 10. This was one of the most memorable years he had in WWE. I would love to see him on that top 10 list. Because it's his last year, and I want him to
Yeah.
have those matches that are so memorable that we have no choice but to put him
Yes.
on our top 10. As far as who could be number one, you know what? I put him pretty low on the list this year, but I do think if he has those main event matches, he really could be number one, and that's Gunther. I
I
think
love it.
Gunther could take that big step up for me. He just
Yeah.
needs to have those high profile matches. And I just know deep down in my heart, if he gets those high profile matches, he will deliver. And it will be some of the best matches we've seen him have in WWE. So I'd love to see Gunther just take a huge step up for us and get that number one spot
Yeah.
next year.
I love it. I agree. Gunther absolutely can go there. For the sake to make it interesting, I'll give you two different names. We kind of talked about both of them a little bit already. As far as somebody who's not on this top 10 that I think will almost assuredly be on the top 10 next year, I got to go MJF. I think MJF is go in 2025. I think AEW is going to course correct a little bit and they're going to start booking a little bit better. I have a little bit more faith in them. I think MJF is going to be in more high profile matches. He's going to be in more consistent programs. And if MJF is not on this list in 2025, there's a real issue with AEW and MJF. As far as who's number one, I'm going to stick with AEW. I think it's time to soon put the championship on Will Ospreay. And I think if you give him the championships and you give him the matches that you know he can deliver, I don't know how anyone can beat him for that number one spot next year.
Yeah, I do agree with you on both of those. I do think if MJF is not on the top 10 next year, we're going to have a real discussion about his place in AEW.
Yeah.
And I do think that the thing is, Will Ospreay probably should have been number one
This year.
on this year's list. So if he's not on number one on next year's list, we might have pitchforks coming to our door.
Yeah.
So yeah, I 100% agree with you though that he should be their main champion, and we should start to see the company built around either a Will Ospreay or even an MJF heading
Yeah.
into 2025.
Another person, I'll give you a bonus one. I really think Moxley should deserve a spot as an honorable mention. If not, he's been the ace for AEW. I could see him being on the top 10 next year as well. AEW has so much potential. I think they just need to, quite frankly, book better.
Yeah, and I'll give you another name just because he's had a strong end of 2024 that maybe could carry some momentum into
Mm.
2025. How about Kevin Owens? How about
Yes.
Kevin Owens, who, recently turned heel? If he could become that prize fighter again, he's walking around WWE headquarters with the Winged
The Winged
Eagle
Eagle.
WWE Championship. So maybe that could lead to some compelling storylines with him. And I think his dynamic with this whole bloodline stuff and his dynamic, if he has a feud with CM Punk, there's no
Yeah.
doubt in my mind that he'll end up on
Money.
a top 10 list next year. So
Certainly your top 10 list.
100%, because I think those promos just seem so money to me as Kevin
Yeah.
Owens and CM Punk. I feel like Kevin Owens is the true opposite or the true adversary to CM Punk. So if they do that feud next year, I am all in on that.
Wow. Well, we have a lot to look forward to. It's been a great year for wrestling in 2024. If you enjoyed this list, obviously, let us know. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, comment down below. Who did we miss from our list? Who was too high? Who was too low? We want to hear from you guys. We love wrestling. We know you guys do too. That's why you're watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other videos we did. We did top 5 matches. We did the top shows. We did the top 10 women. So we got a lot more content coming for you. A lot of big stuff coming up all around the horizon. We got Raw's debut on Netflix just a couple weeks away. And man, when you talk about big shows, I'm going to go on record. I think this will be the single greatest TV episode that WWE's ever done. I
Oof. Okay.
They are hyping it up. They are putting 2 WrestleMania matches out there, and that is already just what's been advertised. I'm pretty sure Travis Scott is performing too. Regardless of how you feel about Travis Scott, that just shows you how much emphasis they're really pushing on this thing. Like it is a big, big deal. Roman Reigns versus Solo Sikoa for the Ulafala. Seth Rollins versus CM Punk, which I know you're excited for on Raw is Netflix. So we got that coming up. Of course, the Royal Rumble in January. We have AEW World End here even sooner than all of that we'll be talking about. So a lot of wrestling still to come as we wrap up 2024.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've talked to your coworker, but I think his buddy might be showing up on the January 6th edition of Netflix. You hear about this? A
No, I did
little, a
not.
little potential
Oh,
for,
interesting.
yeah. So we'll have to see what happens on Netflix. They did tease it on Raw, and your buddy did tweet out the zero with the line through it. That being, I don't, should I say his name?
Yeah, yeah,
Alex Abrahantes,
yeah.
who best friends with Jason Marcus, if anyone doesn't know.
Yes, good friend.
Uh, but it's some exciting stuff to look forward
I
to.
did not
But
know that. I
for
thought he
anyone,
was staying with AEW.
well,
We'll
we'll have
see.
to see on January 6th. We'll have to see. But for now, everyone have a safe and happy holidays. We will catch you guys after the holidays with previews for Netflix. We'll be
Mm,
checking out AEW's World's End. But for now, we are, on hiatus through the holidays. So everyone have a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and whatever else you celebrate. Happy Hanukkah. All the happy holidays to you guys. And
yes.
we will catch you guys in the next year.
Peace.